Well, only, let me check my calendar real quick. Yep. 5 more months left of this season, and thank God it's been a banger and just completely action-packed because I've been grinding. Anyway, with the release of the new in-game LFG, aka Group Finder, I thought it was about time that we went over what I think one of the best builds in the game this season is. And while this build can technically be used elsewhere, it's mainly meant for dungeons and raids and targeted at those people running those dungeons and raids for the first time via the Group Finder, as it aids in drastically improving survivability. But before we get into this crazy build, let's first get into this crazy segue to our sponsor, HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit service. Whether your resolution is to save money, eat better, or stress less, HelloFresh is here to help. With fresh ingredients and chef-crafted recipes at a price that won't make you double-check your wallet, delivered right to your door. Being motivated at this time of year is easy in the beginning, but what about when you get to those nights when your schedule is a little bit more packed? HelloFresh has you covered with a lineup of quick and easy meals, including 15-minute recipes designed to make not eating out that much easier. And if you think they only have a handful of meals to choose from, you'd be wrong, as HelloFresh has over 45 dinner options. Plus, they got lunch, snacks, and, for a limited time, free breakfast for life. That's right now you can get 1 free breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. And my favorite part about HelloFresh is the flexibility. I can change meals, increase, decrease, all with no hassle. So a big thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Go to my link down in the description, use code POGMyFi1 free, and receive 1 free breakfast item per box while subscription is active. So before we get into the subclass loadout and gameplay loop, let's discuss what this build does. This build is fantastic for getting easy healing effects while on Warlock, hence the unkillable and improved survivability that I mentioned earlier. This build is going to make Restoration ×2 and Cure ×3 easily accessible with little to no cooldown, since they are not reliant on using your abilities, while also being extremely easy to extend the duration with a special fragment and certain weapons that we'll talk about. So if being unkillable with constant healing sounds good to you, then stick around. Okay, so for the subclass abilities and all that good stuff. For the super, you're going to want Well of Radiance. Yes, you can run Dawn Blade, and the special part of this build will still work, but Well of Radiance is the one to use for max survivability, which is the theme here. Class ability, and you're going to throw on Phoenix Dive. This way, if you happen to almost die or about to die or whatever, you can get back up to full HP immediately with the simple press of a button. Next up, our jump, and while I prefer Burst Glide, the jump doesn't actually affect the build at all, so whatever your preference is here will work. Same thing for the melee. I prefer and recommend Incinerator Snap, but if you hate Incinerator Snap, then run whatever feels best for you. Now for our nade, Solar Nade, and no, we aren't using Sun Bracers. Imagine though, I make a whole build video, and turns out the build is just Solar Nades and Sun Bracers. Getting into the aspects, and we're going to be running Touch of Flame to enhance our grenades, and Icarus Dash because, well, I like going fast. Now, for the fragments, and at this point, there are a ton of possible options to build into. Like, where we're at right now is pretty much the foundation of most of my lock solar builds, but for this one, we're going to be starting out with Ember of Ashes, which applies more Scorch stacks to targets. This, in turn, enhances our melee and grenade even further than Touch of Flame already does. Fragment number 2, you're going to want Ember of Torches. So whenever you use your melee charge on something, you get Radiant, which gives you a 25% damage buff to your weapons. Number 3, Ember of Solace. So your Radiant and Restoration effects have increased duration. And finally, which is what makes this build really good, Ember of Empyrean. Solar weapons or ability final blows extend the duration of Radiant and Restoration. Yeah, the whole really easy to extend is probably starting to make a whole lot of sense right about now. Okay, so now for the loadout. This season, Bungie reworked a bunch of exotics, and the one that we're going to be using, you might already be using, or maybe you haven't used in months, but it's Karnstein Armlets. If you're unaware, when Season of the Wish launched, they went from giving you the vampire buff thingy on melee kill to granting Restoration ×1 and Cure. And if you get a finisher, then it ups the a reward, the effects applied, like what you get for doing something. To restoration ×2 and cure ×3. Now, while you can technically run any solar weapon you want, I have a few that I think you should highly consider. First up, my personal favorite, Sunshot, the only 150 RPM hand cannon in the game, and it makes everything go kaboom, and it's great. At this point, I think it's just my favorite weapon in Destiny 2, period. Now, another option, and kind of an unusual one, Tommy's Matchbook. One of my buddies has been talking my ear off about Tommy's pretty much all season, and I finally caved to shut him up, and I can't lie, it's actually a lot better than I remember, like much better than I remember. Oh, and if you're like me and have no idea how you got this thing, because I'm pretty sure it was one of the season pass weapons from like way back in Shadowkeep, and your time machine happens to be broken, you can still get it from the Monuments of Lost Light for 1 exotic cipher, 100,000 glimmer, and 1 ascendant shard. For anyone that wants to run a solar legendary primary weapon, I'm going to recommend the Emit AR2. It's a good RPM, has good perks, and it's craftable. What more do you want? Oh, you want more weapons? Well, Vex Mythoclast from Vogue is pretty good. Teraba from the raid they sunset and will probably bring you back that you can get, I think, from the Monuments of Lost Lights as well. It was also pretty good. Callus's mini tool is still great. The Neomuna Quest Parting the Veil weapon, the Epicaw, it's something integration, man. I can't pronounce the thing for the life of me. Or No Survivors from Ghost of the Deep. For stats, you're going to really try and achieve 100 resilience, followed by as much melee, recovery, and grenade as possible in that order. For real, just get resilience to 100. For mods that are going to enhance this build even further, Harmonic Siphon on your helmet, so multi-kills with your solar primary weapon, create orbs of power. Boots, you're going to want 3x Solar Surge to buff your primary weapon even further, and on your Bond, Time Dilation to extend your weapon's surge timer, and 2x Outreach, so every time you use your class ability, you get melee energy back. The whole gameplay loop of this build is as follows. Get a finisher final blow for cure and restoration. Hit an enemy with a melee ability for radiant. Then start going to town with your solar weapon and solar abilities to maintain radiant and restoration. Then just get a melee or finisher when low on health to get all of it back. Like I mentioned earlier, this build is fantastic for improving survivability, which is probably the #1 most important thing when doing a dungeon or raid for the first time. As someone that has Sherpa'd literally thousands of people through raids and just being able to stay alive is the most important thing that you can do. If you know of anything that could be added to this build to make it even better, or something to substitute in, drop a comment down below for other people and I to see. I stream very occasionally over on twitch.tv/Jeremiah. Feel free to subscribe if you're new, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.